There comes a moment in every toxic dynamic when the mask finally slips and the narcissist loses the control they worked so hard to maintain. It doesn't happen quickly and it doesn't happen quietly. It happens when the person who was once manipulated, blamed, or gaslit starts reclaiming their power, piece by piece. Today we're talking about 5 shocking signs that a narcissist has finally lost control. And more importantly, why these signs often mean you are finally stepping into a healthier, clearer version of yourself. Because when someone who thrives on dominance and superiority begins slipping, their behavior becomes louder, more desperate, and more revealing. Let's break this down with real-life examples, emotional insight, and clear explanations so you can recognize these patterns instantly. When a narcissist starts losing control, one of the earliest and most unmistakable signs is that their manipulation tactics suddenly stop working. What used to pull you in emotionally, drain you mentally, or shake your confidence now feels strangely powerless. It's not because the narcissist changed, it's because you did. Something inside you shifted, your clarity sharpened, your boundaries strengthened, and the emotional hooks they once relied on no longer sink as deeply. This change is often subtle at first, but its impact is enormous. A narcissist depends on predictable reactions. They depend on your guilt, your fear, your confusion, your desire to fix things. When these responses fade, their entire strategy collapses. You may notice that the familiar guilt tripping no longer lands. They say, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me." And instead of freezing or scrambling to prove your loyalty, you simply sit with your feelings without rushing to soothe theirs. That moment of silence from you, calm, grounded, and unmoved, is the moment their control slips. The script they've used for years suddenly has no audience. Even the gaslighting that once shattered your confidence now sounds hollow. They tell you you're imagining things or you're overreacting, and instead of doubting yourself, you think, "No, I know exactly what I saw, what I felt, and what happened." That certainty is kryptonite to someone who relies on confusion as a weapon. It can feel unsettling the first time you catch yourself not reacting. You're so used to putting out emotional fires, trying to explain yourself, fighting to be understood, or bending to keep the peace, that the sudden stillness inside you feels unusual. But that stillness is power. It means you're stepping out of the psychological fog and starting to see the narcissist tactics in real time. You notice the manipulation while it's happening, and instead of getting pulled into the story they're spinning, you remain rooted in the truth. This is the shift that marks the beginning of emotional freedom. Imagine Sarah, for example. For years, she carried the weight of her partner's emotions on her shoulders. Anytime he wanted something, he used sentimental pressure. "If you really cared about me, you'd do this for me." And every time she felt compelled to prove herself, staying up late to help him, canceling her plans, sacrificing her comfort, all because she feared being labeled uncaring. But one day, something inside her clicked. She realized she was exhausted from constantly giving and getting nothing but blame in return. So when he used that familiar line again, she took a breath and calmly replied, "I'm not responsible for your feelings." That sentence may sound small, but for her it was a quiet revolution. There was no trembling in her voice, no need to justify, no scrambling to fix his disappointment, just a simple truth spoken with confidence. For a narcissist, moments like this are terrifying. Their emotional remote control, the one they've held for years, suddenly stops working. They press the guilt button, nothing. They press the fear button, nothing. They press the "you're the problem" button, still nothing. It is shocking for them because manipulation has always given them predictable results. Their entire communication style is built on creating emotional reactions. When those reactions disappear, they are forced to face a reality they are deeply uncomfortable with. They can no longer shape your behavior. What you may see next is confusion. genuine confusion. They look at you as though you've become a different person overnight. They may say, "What's wrong with you?" or "You're acting weird," because in their mind, your emotional compliance was normal. Your self-assertion feels like a threat. They begin to panic not because they suddenly care deeply about the relationship, but because their control is slipping through their fingers. This loss of control destabilizes them. It disrupts the power structure they depend on. And it doesn't stop with confusion. Panic often follows quickly. They may escalate their behavior, trying twice as hard to provoke a reaction. They may shift from guilt to anger, from anger to tears, from tears to silent treatment, all within hours. Each tactic is an attempt to find the one that still works. When none do, they don't know how to proceed. They have no meaningful emotional tools beyond manipulation. When you stop responding to manipulation, you take away their only language for connection. The silent treatment, for example, loses its edge. What once filled you with dread now feels like a break. You no longer chase them or beg to fix things. You no longer feel the need to end the discomfort. The silence that once controlled you now becomes your space to breathe. This reversal is often a profound moment of empowerment for you and a profound loss for them. Another surprising shift is that you stop explaining yourself. You realize that explanations were never heard, never acknowledged, and never respected. You see that explaining wasn't communication. It was a trap. It kept you engaged in circular conversations that went nowhere. When you stop over-explaining, you reclaim your time, your energy, and your emotional clarity. A narcissist reads this as defiance, not self-respect. And because they see everything through the lens of control, they assume you must be influenced by someone else. They may start accusing you of being manipulated or coached because they can't imagine that you're thinking for yourself. In their world, independence equals rebellion. The most powerful part of this shift is that it often occurs quietly. There's no dramatic confrontation, no shouting match, no emotional explosion, just a gradual, steady withdrawal of your emotional participation. While it may seem small on the outside, internally, it is monumental. It is the moment you begin to trust your own reality again. When someone who depends on manipulation can no longer influence your reactions, everything about the dynamic changes. The narcissist loses the sense of psychological ownership they once felt. They don't know who they are without control because control is how they define their importance. And when that importance fades in your eyes, it triggers a deep, primitive fear inside them. A fear of irrelevance, a fear of exposure, and a fear of losing the person who once filled their emotional void. What you're witnessing is not anger, it's loss. Not loss of love, but loss of dominance. And that loss is often the first shocking sign that their influence over you is fading and your inner strength is finally rising. When a narcissist begins to lose control, one of the clearest signs is how intensely they start reacting to even the smallest disruptions to their expectations. Their emotional responses become exaggerated, disproportionate, and strangely dramatic. What used to be minor, everyday inconveniences now trigger explosive reactions, silent hostility, or sudden mood swings. This shift isn't random. It's a direct reflection of the internal panic they feel when they sense that the psychological grip they once held over you is slipping. Their world begins to destabilize the moment yours starts to strengthen. You start noticing this when simple, reasonable boundaries cause reactions that are wildly out of proportion. You say, "I can't talk right now, I'm busy," and they behave as if you've committed a betrayal. You take longer to reply to a text, and suddenly they accuse you of disrespecting them. You express a different opinion, and they interpret it as a personal attack. Their reactions aren't about the moment, they're about the threat they feel underneath the moment. A narcissist's emotional reactivity is really a window into their fear of losing relevance, fear of losing control, and fear of being exposed. It can feel shocking because the shift is drastic. Someone who usually presents themselves as calm, superior, and in control becomes visibly unsettled, irritated, or volatile. They may glare, slam doors, use sarcasm, give curt responses, or erupt in anger over something small like a change of plans or a minor inconvenience. This change is not random, it's a psychological alarm system going off inside them. When you stop responding to their manipulation, they lose access to their favorite emotional tools. And without those tools, their sense of dominance crumbles. This emotional unraveling is well documented in psychological research. Individuals with narcissistic traits experience something known as narcissistic injury, a deep, destabilizing emotional wound triggered by rejection, loss of control, or even mild criticism. Their brain processes these moments as threats, activating fight or flight responses. In other words, what feels like a normal boundary to you feels like a danger signal to them. That danger activates panic, and panic activates aggressive, defensive, or erratic behavior. You might also notice that their emotional reactions become inconsistent. One minute they're furious, the next they're strangely calm, and then suddenly passive-aggressive. It's like you're watching rapid emotional shape-shifting. This inconsistency is not moodiness, it's strategy mixed with instability. When they feel control slipping, they don't know which tactic will work, so they try them all in rapid succession. Anger doesn't work, they switch to guilt. Guilt doesn't work, they try self-pity. Self-pity doesn't work, they try silent treatment. Each reaction is an attempt to reestablish the dynamic where your emotions revolve around theirs. Real-life examples of this pattern are common. Consider a situation where someone gently says, "I'm not available tonight." To most people, this is neutral information. But to a narcissist who depends on constant access and influence, it feels like rejection. Instead of saying, okay, they might respond with something like, "Wow, I guess I'm not important to you anymore," or "You've really changed," or even, "I knew you were hiding something." A simple boundary becomes a catalyst for emotional chaos. Not because the boundary is wrong, but because the narcissist can't regulate their emotions without controlling someone else's. Another example, perhaps you stop justifying yourself the way you used to. You're no longer eager to explain every detail of your day or defend every decision. This shift might be subtle, but to a narcissist, it's seismic. They feel your independence, and independence threatens their sense of superiority. So they overreact. They may accuse you of being distant, secretive, or ungrateful. They may start checking up on you more, asking probing questions, or reacting with suspicion over harmless things. These overreactions expose something important. They are not reacting to you, they are reacting to the fear inside themselves. The irony is that these reactions often reveal the very fragility they work so hard to hide. Narcissistic individuals often build their identity around the illusion of strength and control, but the moment that illusion is challenged, even slightly, their insecurity becomes visible. The anger, the accusations, the defensiveness, all of it is an emotional veil covering the reality that they feel powerless. It is the psychological equivalent of flailing. You may also notice how closely they monitor your responses. They study your face, your tone, your hesitation, your silence. They are looking for signs that their techniques still work. When they don't see those signs, the panic intensifies. It's similar to someone pressing buttons on a device that suddenly stopped functioning. They press harder, faster, more desperately. Except in this case, the device is you, and the panic you see is the realization that the emotional control panel is no longer connected. This emotional overreaction is also tied to entitlement. Narcissists believe they should be the center of your attention, that their emotions should be prioritized, and that your boundaries are inconveniences rather than human needs. When you stop catering to this entitlement, it creates an emotional void they don't know how to manage. They react by trying to force the old dynamic back into place through emotional intensity. But perhaps the most important thing to recognize is that these overreactions are not signs that you're doing something wrong. They are signs that you're doing something right. Your calmness, your boundaries, your clarity. They disrupt the dysfunctional system that kept you under their psychological influence. Their emotional volatility is a mirror showing you just how much power you once gave away and how much you are finally reclaiming. What feels like chaos on their end is actually growth on yours. The louder they become, the clearer the truth becomes. They're not losing you. They're losing the control they thought they had over you. When a narcissist feels their control slipping, they often turn to one of the most destructive and calculated tactics in their arsenal. They begin smearing you behind your back. This isn't just casual gossip or a misunderstanding. It's a deliberate, strategic attempt to manipulate how others see you so that the narcissist can maintain the power they can no longer exert directly. When they realize they can't influence your thoughts, emotions, or decisions anymore, they try to influence the thoughts and perceptions of the people around you. This shift can feel shocking because it often comes from someone who once claimed to care for you, value you, or have your back. But the moment you stop playing your assigned role in their narrative, they write a new one where they are the victim and you are the villain. This is why smear campaigns are so psychologically damaging. They distort reality in ways that make you question your own connections, your reputation, and sometimes even your intuition. One day things seem relatively calm, and the next you're hearing through a friend or coworker that the narcissist has been painting you as unstable, ungrateful, selfish, or cruel. They may even accuse you of the very behaviors they themselves are guilty of, projecting their flaws onto you so convincingly that others start to believe them. It's a painful experience because it feels like someone is rewriting your life from the outside. What's important to understand is that smear campaigns don't begin because you did something wrong. They begin because you did something powerful. You stood up for yourself. You enforced a boundary. You walked away. You stopped feeding the dynamic. You stopped giving them emotional access. And when a narcissist senses that the influence they once held is dissolving, they panic, not internally, where healthy people process fear and insecurity, but externally, where they try to regain power by controlling the social narrative. You might see this unfold gradually at first. They start dropping subtle comments to mutual friends, coworkers, or family members. I'm really worried about them, or they've been so distant lately, or something is off with them. These comments sound caring, but they are seeds planted to create doubt about your stability or your character. Later, as their control weakens further, the comments become more direct. They're impossible to deal with, or they've changed, or they're treating me terribly for no reason. By the time you realize what's happening, a full story has already been told, one in which they are the misunderstood, loyal, suffering person, and you are the cold, ungrateful, or unstable one. Real-life examples of this are heartbreakingly common. Consider Daniel, who had always supported his brother financially. When Daniel finally said he could no longer lend money, he quietly set a boundary. But instead of accepting it, his brother began telling family members, Daniel has become selfish, he doesn't care about family anymore, or he thinks he's better than everyone. None of these things were true, but they served a purpose. They protected the narcissist's ego by reframing Daniel's boundary as cruelty. Suddenly, Daniel found himself defending choices that were healthy, reasonable, and necessary, choices that were twisted into character flaws. This is the emotional trap of a smear campaign. You're put in a position where you feel compelled to explain or justify your behavior to people who already heard the narcissist's version first. And because narcissists often appear charming, concerned, or persuasive to outsiders, those outsiders may believe them, at least initially. This is deeply painful, not just because your reputation is being attacked, but because relationships you trusted may begin to shift. You may find people treating you differently, acting distant, or hesitating to take your side because they've been fed a narrative that casts you in a negative light. Narcissists do this because the loss of control over you creates a type of psychological void. They can no longer shape your thoughts or emotions, so they compensate by shaping the environment around you. It's their way of maintaining dominance indirectly. If they can't control you, they'll try to control how others see you. They'll try to isolate you socially, professionally, or emotionally. They'll try to make you come back to them, not out of love, but out of desperation to prove your innocence. It's a trap designed to pull you back into the dynamic you worked so hard to escape. Another layer of this tactic is that it protects the narcissist's image. Image is everything to them. They often view relationships as an opportunity to maintain admiration, validation, or power. So when you stop feeding those needs, they feel threatened. If the relationship collapses, they can't take accountability. They cannot allow the possibility that others might think they are at fault. So they rewrite the story in a way that safeguards their reputation and damages yours. It's a defensive maneuver disguised as concern. You may also notice that the smear campaign intensifies when you begin to heal. Your growth, independence, and emotional clarity are the very things that undermine their narrative. The healthier you become, the more desperate they become. This is why people often say the narcissist's worst behavior appears after they leave the relationship or after they start standing up for themselves. And as painful as it is to witness the distortions and lies being spread about you, there is something deeply revealing happening beneath the surface. Smear campaigns are a confession, an indirect admission that the narcissist has lost the influence they once held. They wouldn't need to distort your image if they still had control over your reality. They wouldn't need to manipulate others if they could still manipulate you. Their desperation is evidence of their loss. In a strange and painful way, the smear campaign is proof of your strength. It signals that you are no longer accessible in the ways you once were. You're no longer emotionally available to be manipulated. You're no longer willing to bend or silence yourself to keep the peace. The noise they are creating outside of you is a distraction from the quiet power rising inside of you. Their lies may be loud, but your truth is still intact. And in time, the people who matter will see the reality for themselves, not because you convince them, but because the narcissist eventually exposes their own patterns through their behavior. Smear campaigns reveal much more about the narcissist than they ever reveal about you. They reveal insecurity, desperation, and fear disguised as confidence and righteousness. This shift, painful as it is, marks a turning point. You're witnessing the unraveling of the power they once held and the beginning of the freedom you are steadily reclaiming. When a narcissist realizes they are losing their grip on you, one of the most predictable yet emotionally confusing tactics they turn to is the attempt to pull you back in. What many describe as a Hoover, named after the vacuum that sucks everything back toward it. This is not an act of love, insight, or genuine transformation. It is an act of desperation. It is the narcissist scrambling to regain access to the emotional supply they once relied on. When their usual strategies, manipulation, guilt, anger, silent treatment, stop working, they reach for the tactic that has often worked before. They try to re-enter your life by becoming exactly what they think you want, just long enough to regain control. This phase is often confusing because the narcissist becomes unusually warm, attentive, apologetic, even self-reflective. Their tone softens, their words carry sentiment, their behavior suddenly mirrors the idealized version of themselves they used to hook you in the beginning. They may say things like, "I realize I made mistakes," or "I've been doing a lot of thinking," or "I can't lose you. You mean too much to me." These phrases sound sincere, especially if you've spent months or years longing for accountability or understanding. But what's missing from these apologies is the one thing that makes real change possible: depth. They apologize for vague things, everything, how I acted, the way things went, instead of naming the behavior, understanding its impact, and showing genuine willingness to repair it. This is not apology, it is performance. And it's often incredibly effective on people who have been wounded, confused, or conditioned to believe that the relationship's failure was their fault. The narcissist knows this. They sense when you're emotionally vulnerable, lonely, or craving closure. They can read the space between your words and use it to their advantage. That is why the Hoover often comes at the very moment you start to feel stronger. It's not a coincidence, it's timing. They feel the shift in you before you fully recognize it in yourself. You might see this show up in sudden kindness after weeks of coldness. The person who ignored your calls is now calling you repeatedly. The person who dismissed your feelings is suddenly asking how you're doing. The person who never acknowledged your efforts is now telling you they appreciate everything you've done. It's a sharp emotional reversal intended to destabilize your progress. Just when you begin healing, they reappear as the person you originally fell for, pulling at your heart in a way that makes you question your decisions. Consider Mia's story. After enduring months of criticism, invalidation, and emotional distance, she finally separated from her boyfriend. She spent weeks rebuilding herself, reconnecting with friends, and learning to enjoy the quiet that once felt uncomfortable. Then, out of nowhere, her ex sent a long message filled with emotional declarations. "I've been doing deep work. I finally realize how much you mean to me. I can't imagine life without you, and let's start over. I promise it will be different." The words were poetic, intense, and perfectly tailored to the very things Mia longed to hear during the relationship. It felt like closure. It felt like hope. It felt like maybe, just maybe, things could be better this time. But none of these messages acknowledged the actual behavior that caused the breakup. There were no specifics, no accountability, no plan for repair, no evidence of internal growth, just emotional persuasion designed to trigger nostalgia and rewrite the pain of the past. This is the core of a Hoover. It is not built on truth, but on emotional memory. Narcissists aren't trying to rebuild the relationship, they're trying to rebuild the control. And once you take the bait, the mask drops again. The warmth fades, the old behaviors return. The cycle resets. This is why people often say the return phase is worse than the original relationship. The contrast between the love bombing and the reality becomes even more painful. Another version of the Hoover shows up as sadness or vulnerability. The same person who once mocked your feelings now presents themselves as fragile and broken. They may say things like, "I've been so depressed without you. Nobody understands me the way you do," or "You're the only person I trust." These statements are designed to evoke empathy, especially if you're someone who has always carried emotional weight in relationships. Narcissists know how deeply empathetic people feel responsibility for others' suffering. They know this vulnerability can pull you back in faster than any apology ever could. But again, their vulnerability isn't real healing, it's leverage. Sometimes the Hoover takes a more subtle form. They start liking your posts on social media. They send a simple "hey" after months of silence. They casually ask mutual friends how you're doing. They send you a photo from a place you used to go together. They create opportunities for you to remember them. These small gestures are not innocent, they are tests. The narcissist is checking the emotional door to see if it's still unlocked. If you respond warmly, even slightly, they escalate. If you respond coldly, they try a different angle. If you don't respond at all, they might switch from sweetness to blame. "I guess you don't care. I thought we meant something. I can't believe you're treating me this way." Their behavior shifts depending on what they think will pull you back. And then there's the most deceptive version of all, the sudden promise of self-improvement. They claim they're going to therapy. They say they're working on themselves. They may even pretend to have had an emotional breakthrough. These claims are powerful because you may have spent so long hoping they would finally see the harm they caused. But real change doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen only when you walk away. Real change is consistent, humble, and self-driven, not triggered by loss of control. What makes the Hoover emotionally dangerous is not the narcissist's behavior, it's the hope it awakens in you. the hope that maybe this time things will be different, that maybe they finally understand, that maybe the person you loved is returning. But the truth is, the person you're seeing during the Hoover phase is not them. It's a version of them crafted to regain access to you. And once they regain that access, the illusion collapses. Hoovering is not a sign of love. It is a sign of dependency. It is not a sign of growth. It is a sign of panic. It is not about connection. It is about possession. What you're witnessing during this phase is the narcissist's fear of losing the emotional supply they once relied on. When they can no longer control you directly, they try to recreate the bond through intensity, nostalgia, guilt, or vulnerability. Their efforts are loud because their fear is loud. The very fact that they're trying so hard to pull you back is proof of something profound. You have already taken steps they never thought you could. You have already disrupted the cycle. You have already begun reclaiming the parts of yourself they depended on for their sense of power. The Hoover is not their strength. It is their last attempt to reclaim what they are losing. The version of you who once believed their promises. When a narcissist finally realizes that their usual methods of control no longer work, something remarkable and deeply revealing happens. They shift into full victim mode. This transformation is often so dramatic, so sudden, and so emotionally manipulative that it can leave you questioning your own reality once again. But this performance isn't accidental. It's a calculated psychological maneuver designed to protect their ego, salvage their image, and lure back anyone who has started to see through the facade. The moment they sense their dominance slipping, their narrative changes completely. They become the misunderstood one, the innocent one, the wounded one, and you become the source of all the pain. What makes this tactic so powerful is how believable it can look from the outside. Narcissists are masters of emotional theater. They know how to cry without shedding real tears. They know how to look lost or broken without truly feeling anything beneath the surface. They know how to use just the right phrases. I don't know what I did wrong. I tried my best. You just left me. Everyone turns on me. I gave them everything, and look how they treat me. These statements are not confessions. They are scripts. Scripts designed to gain sympathy, attention, and emotional leverage from anyone willing to listen. When they turn themselves into the victim, they effectively flip the entire dynamic. Suddenly, you are painted as the cold one, the selfish one, the one who abandoned them. And because narcissists are often charming, articulate, or socially charismatic, many people believe them, especially those who haven't witnessed the private cruelty, manipulation, or emotional instability you endured behind closed doors. This shift into victimhood often begins once their other tactics fail. When anger doesn't bring you back, when guilt no longer sways you, when manipulation falls flat, they resort to the emotional nuclear option, portraying themselves as the injured party. This is the psychological equivalent of throwing themselves on the floor and crying loudly enough for the entire building to hear. It's attention-seeking dressed as pain. Consider how this plays out in real life. Imagine that after months of trying to set boundaries with a narcissistic partner, you finally pull away. You stop engaging in arguments. You stop feeding into their drama. You stop justifying yourself. At first, they may react with rage, but when that doesn't work, they shift gears. Suddenly, you hear through mutual friends, they said you've been treating them terribly, or they're really hurt by how distant you've become, or they told me you abandoned them. These statements aren't rooted in truth. They're rooted in the narcissist's need to rewrite the story so they never have to confront their own behavior. This tactic isn't just for outsiders. They may bring this performance directly to you. They might say things like, "I've been suffering alone. I can't believe you would do this to me. I thought you cared, or you've really changed. You're suddenly put in the uncomfortable position of defending yourself against accusations that came from nowhere. They take the harm they caused and place it at your feet, turning themselves into the emotional casualty. It is a stunning reversal of reality. This pattern is also deeply connected to how narcissists experience shame. Narcissistic individuals have an extremely fragile sense of self-worth that they work tirelessly to hide. When they face even mild criticism, rejection, or boundary setting, it triggers a profound internal panic, a sense of inner collapse. Instead of dealing with that shame internally, they externalize it, they deflect it, they project it. And the easiest way to deflect shame is to blame someone else while simultaneously presenting themselves as blameless. So when you assert yourself, they don't interpret it as they're setting healthy boundaries. They interpret it as they're attacking me. When you walk away from abuse, they don't think, I need to change. They think, look what they did to me. This emotional blindness is part of what makes narcissists so destructive. They are incapable of seeing conflict from any perspective but their own. Another layer of this is that playing the victim generates an enormous amount of sympathy that can be weaponized. They may use it to pull you back in. They may use it to rally others to their side. They may use it to protect their public image. Narcissists care deeply about how they appear to the world, and portraying themselves as the suffering party ensures they remain the hero or martyr of their own story. A classic example of this can be seen in workplace dynamics. Imagine a narcissistic employee who constantly undermines colleagues, takes credit for others' work, and refuses to take accountability. When confronted, instead of acknowledging their actions, they suddenly collapse into victimhood. Everyone here is against me. People keep sabotaging me. I'm being unfairly targeted. This tactic is incredibly effective in professional environments because it obscures the actual issue and shifts focus onto their supposed suffering. You may also notice the narcissist exaggerates or fabricates stories about their own pain to gain emotional leverage. They might claim to be devastated, depressed, unable to eat, unable to sleep, all because of what you did. For someone who has spent months or years trying to heal from the emotional wounds inflicted by them, hearing these claims can be infuriating and confusing. But it's important to understand the narcissist is not actually acknowledging emotional reality. They are performing it. And if you do not return to comfort them, they escalate. Their victim narrative becomes more dramatic, more embellished, more desperate. They may accuse you of cruelty. They may accuse you of abandonment. They may accuse you of lacking empathy. They turn your strength into their wound. They make your boundaries look like betrayal. They make your healing look like harm. What's important to recognize is that this shift into victimhood is a sign of collapse, not emotional growth. It means they've run out of strategies. It means their influence is fading. It means they no longer know how to pull the strings they once controlled effortlessly. The louder their victim narrative becomes, the more you can be certain that they feel the ground shifting beneath them. And here's the deeply empowering truth behind their victim performance. It reveals the truth about your transformation. People only resort to these tactics when they no longer have access to your emotional world. They become victims when they have no other way to maintain their position in your life. Their helplessness is not real. It's a reaction to your strength. When a narcissist starts playing the victim in every situation, it is not a reflection of who you are. It is a reflection of what they fear most: accountability, exposure, and the loss of the person who once maintained their emotional stability. Their victimhood is a story, and you are no longer a character in it. If you're recognizing these signs, it means you're breaking free from a cycle designed to keep you small. The chaos you're seeing in them is actually the clarity rising in you. When a narcissist loses control, it's not the end of your story. It's the beginning of reclaiming your peace, your boundaries, and your identity. And that is the moment you step out of their shadow and back into your own life.